What sense are we to make of the American President Donald J. Trump? In this video, I propose to offer, with much hesitation and trepidation, a particular interpretation of the events that are currently unfolding on the world stage in the interactions among nations. How are we to understand the role that Donald Trump is playing at the moment? Clearly, people are finding it hard to understand him and what he has set out to do in terms of well settled, familiar categories of historical patterns, thoughts, and possibilities. And that's why many people choose to characterize him as the disruptor. I have to say very clearly at the outset that I have no problem with disruptors. In fact, I believe that disruption is a necessary process and a precondition for new creation. You can't bring in the new without disrupting the old. So there is a very important and relevant role that needs to be ascribed to a margin. A substantial margin must be allowed and preserved for the role of disruption. And in the Bible, of course, there is a clear indication to this pattern. In the 5th chapter of John's Gospel, the pool of Bethesda, where the angel will come and disturb the waters or disrupt the waters or disrupt the serenity of the lake. And that is a precondition for individuals experiencing healing. So there is certainly a positive aspect to this disturbance, which is embedded in that episode. But since I'm addressing a non-religious audience through this video, at least that's my intention, let me not invoke biblical or scriptural references. Now, I want to suggest very humbly in this video that perhaps the appropriate, maybe even the best way to understand the role that Donald Trump is now playing in relation to the quote-unquote current global order is to see him as an agent of historical nemesis. Historical nemesis. Now, let me very briefly explain what that concept means. A majority of the people who are participating in this YouTube fellowship may not need any explanation whatsoever, but in case there is one or there are a couple of people who don't understand, because to me everyone matters, let me offer the following explanation. Put very simply, the idea of historical nemesis implies that there is a consequence to everything that we do, which is a familiar idea. For example, if you touch fire, your finger will burn. If you lose your balance, you fall down. There's a consequence. If you waste your time, then you will come to grief, so on and so forth. When this idea is applied on the mega scale, applied to the life of nations, of societies, of cultures, then this idea of the historical nemesis comes about. So what happens is a nation or a people during a certain familiar, a certain favorable period of history, when everything seems to be going well for that nation, for that people, they lose all sense of proportion and they go around conquering other peoples who are unfortunately less powerful or they are weaker than them. Therefore, they think they have a historical license or sometimes even divine license to go and subjugate the peoples of the earth. In fact, the British people, in those days they were called the English people, they used to call this the white man's burden. the white man has a historical, in fact, a God assigned mandate to go all over the world, subjugating people belonging to inferior cultures, Afro Asian peoples by and large, for their own sake, for their benefit. It's good for them that they are colonized and subjugated by the white man. This is called the white man's burden. And Joseph Conrad has a very interesting novel based on this. It's called The Heart of Darkness. It's a very small novel. I'll commend that novel to you. It's very interesting how Joseph Conrad, who is actually a man of Polish origin and who subsequently became a citizen of England, looks at this whole idea of the white man's burden. So the British, like all other colonizers, like the French, the Dutch, etc., they sincerely believed that it was good for people in other continents, other regions to be conquered, dominated by them because they were culturally far more advanced. And by being conquered by these advanced people, the conquered people, subjugated people only stood to gain, and what such gains would be would be determined by the colonial masters, etc. The whole history of the colonial adventure we know, and there's no need for me to go over familiar territory. Now, suppose this role is reversed. European nations, for a very long period of time, enjoyed the benefit of being colonizers. The wealth of nations flowed into these colonizing British European countries, including Great Britain, for a considerable period of time. India is a classic example. How much wealth the colonial masters drained away from India, nobody really knows. It's not been quantified. Various figures are put on it. I'm not here to determine that. But quite obviously, if a country has been subjugated and its economic life dominated by another country for 200 years, it stands to reason to believe that a very substantial amount of the wealth of India was drained away from here, and it all went into the colonial master's kitty. The French nation, France did the same thing vis-a-vis the colonies that it dominated, and several of them. Denmark did the same thing. So there is this European background, European history of colonizing other people and exploiting them to the hilt. Now, the irony here is that the present United States of America, the most dominant force in the world, the richest country in the world, the mightiest army in the world, was once a British colony. And see how the roles are reversed. This is what I mean by the nemesis of history. History has a way of paying back. It's a payback time in the majestic march of history. So European nations who went around colonizing others are now in a rather pathetic state. Look at the utter disarray to which the entire Europe has been plunged by a single statement by Donald Trump. It's pathetic. Those of us who still remember the grandiose time that the colonizing masters of Europe enjoyed for such a long period of time, the English Empire, the British Empire was the empire, Her Majesty's or His Majesty's land on which the sun never set. That country has been reduced pathetically. Today, the Prime Minister of Great Britain has to go and try and placate Trump, almost like a vassal trying to plead and appeal to the mercy of the Lord. Look at the pathetic state to which Denmark has sunk. So much so that Trump can, in a nonchalant manner, say that the Danish people are not doing a good enough job by Greenland. So it's good for the Greenland that we take it over and we do whatever we want with it. Look at the plight of France. France is a nuclear nation. Great Britain is a nuclear power. But look at the helplessness of these countries. Look at the helplessness of the great nation, perhaps the greatest, the highest culture of Europe by common consent, Germany. whose Hitler thought that he would dominate the entire world. Look at the plight of Germany. Germany is today pleading with France to extend its nuclear umbrella to cover Germany. Look at the other nations. Look at the sense of bewilderment and helplessness that has overtaken the 27 to 30 countries in the wake of the impact of Trump. They just don't know how to deal with it. They come together from time to time, have long meetings, they come out with well intentioned statements, but they don't seem to be making any progress, at least to the extent of visible evidence available to us. Now, how are we to make sense of all this? I think it's payback time in history. The nations that went around conquering and subjugating peoples of other nations, other continents, are today in a helpless state themselves. And America under Trump is treating Europe as sorry, a piece of land or a swathe of land not even worth its attention. J.D. Vance has no qualms in describing the entire Europe as a continent of freeloaders. It's an insult. It's unmasked, open insult to the entire Europe. The contempt with which Europe is being treated. Look at the way Canada, which in geographical area is greater than America, the entire America put together. Trump sees Canada as a small footnote to America and assumes that Canada will be the 51st state of the United States of America, unilaterally. Now, having now stated this, let me invite your attention to another configuration. Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, the President of America, the President of the German Federation, and the President of China. These three are now emerging as the new colonizers of the world. Efforts are underway, efforts are afoot, wherein or whereby these three major players on the global arena will carve out the rest of the world with some kind of a secret understanding between them. You take this, let me take that, let Trump take the other. Sort of dividing the global real estate according to a certain formula. The formula is not revealed yet. So Trump has already revealed his cards. He will take Canada, he will take Greenland, he will have the Panama Canal, he will have the Gaza Strip, and God alone knows what else. And he certainly has an eye on certain regions, at least of Ukraine, and though the extent to which he will succeed in that plan is highly dubious. As far as Trump is concerned, as far as Putin is concerned, he is very clear about what he wants to control. He wants to regain every square inch of the old USSR, to which he sincerely believes he has a legitimate claim, and therefore Ukraine has absolutely no right to exist as a sovereign independent state. And right behind all this very well-meaning, apparently well-meaning negotiations to bring about peace and to silence the guns in Ukraine, Putin visiting the Russian nuclear submarine and addressing the crew said that he'll crush Ukraine. He will not allow Ukraine to continue as an independent sovereign state. Now you tell me how to understand this stand. Do you think peace is possible in Ukraine with Putin on the one side and Trump on the other? Both have their own vested interests. I don't see any antecedent instance wherein two parties with unmasked ulterior interests have succeeded in establishing or creating peace in a third country where people are suffering as intensely as the Ukrainians are suffering. That's why from the beginning I've been rather skeptical of the Trump initiative in establishing peace. As far as Trump is concerned, as I said in a previous video, for him, peace is only a deal, and the substantive part of the deal is that America must have a permanent claim on the natural resources and the mineral resources of Ukraine. What kind of a peace negotiation it is, you decide for yourself. So basically, what I see today is the resurrection of the old spirit of colonialism. The world is going to be recolonized with three centers of colonial influence, colonial domination: America, the Russian Federation, and China. And the rest of the world will have to adjust to this new reality. And in this, Europe will be hit rather hard. Europe will be subjected to one humiliation after another. Europe has not learned how to cope with the situation. And I hope my viewers know that in terms of natural resources, Europe is one of the poorest, perhaps the poorest of all continents, poorer than South America in terms of natural resources. The wealth of Europe, as I said, has largely colonial sting about it. Once the colonial dimension goes and Europe is left to itself. Now, for example, what Trump has done is to force upon European nations the responsibility for taking care of their own security, which means that all these nations will have to divert a very substantial portion of their national wealth to increasing their security provisions, updating their army, their military technology, warfare arsenal, etc., which actually means that the European economy will be subjected to unprecedented stress and strain, and Europe will have to cope with it, and there will be no free lunch available to them. Now, the overwhelming question, the question of great importance for me, is where will India figure herself? Where will India situate herself in all this? This is a question to which I'm sure the foreign policy pundits in New Delhi are paying substantial attention. We can trust them to do so. And I hope they play this period very wisely. The choice is very stark and very clear. Either India goes with America and remains a vassal state. One thing that's very clear about American foreign policy is that it is not committed to anyone's interest except its own interest. And unlike any other presidents all the former presidents, the 46 presidents that preceded Trump, tried to make it a concealed reality, masked reality, whereas Trump has declared it upfront, America first, which means we will sacrifice any other nation or the interest of any other nation in order to promote our welfare. So American foreign policy will be dominated by brutal self-interest, and therefore all nations that wish to belong to the American camp will have to factor this into their policy perceptions, strategic perceptions. Is that acceptable to India? The other option is for India to belong to the Putin, Xi Jinping or Russia-China alliance with North Korea and Iran and South Africa, Brazil, that group. Now, that adjustment is not going to be easy, though I am inclined to believe that that's where the future lies. I have no doubt at all that that's where the future lies. The American dream is bound to wither away. That's the imperative of history. America cannot continue to behave as it is behaving now under Donald Trump. because it's going to bring about serious reactions and consequences. This will boomerang on America. And I'm afraid Americans are not calculating, thinking very clearly as to what is in the offing for them. The outcome of the present adventure is not going to be very pleasant or profitable to America. The future, I'm pretty convinced, rests with China. Putin knows this. That's the reason why he is busy cultivating Xi Jinping. And together they have declared friendship that's everlasting. And Putin recently came out with the statement that nothing in the world is going to shake that friendship and that alliance. And in fact, as I said in my previous video, Trump was trying to bend backwards in order to placate and please Putin in the vain and foolish hope that he would be able to wean away Trump from the influence of Xi Jinping, because ultimately Trump knows, and everybody in America knows, that the real challenge to American hegemony globally will be China, not Russia. But Putin being Putin, the shrewd KGB agent that he is still at heart, he knows that America cannot be trusted. He knows that it is suicidal to trust America. He knows that his interests are best served by deepening his friendship and his collaboration with China, with, of course, a galaxy of other nations that will come. In fact, I would expect that in the near future, within the next 3 to 5 years, there will be a complete reconfiguration of national alliances, international alliances. Very many countries who are now sporting a facade of neutrality will move into the China-Russia zone of influence. And America will lose out, and lose out rather badly. It will not happen in 3 to 5 years, but definitely it will happen within the next 10 years. Of that, I have no doubt. So keeping that in mind, I think the interests of India would be better served if there can be peace and friendship between India and China. To what extent that can be achieved is a different issue. That will depend on the acumen of Modi and his advisors, and I wish them well. And China is certainly going to gobble up Taiwan, and no force in the world is going to prevent that calamity or that eventuality. If it's a calamity or not, it's up to them to decide. Why should I prejudge an issue? And no force in the world will stand in the way. So we are poised for very, very interesting, indeed very dangerous times. And one small miscalculation could send the entire global community into a tailspin. I hope it doesn't happen. I wish to God it doesn't happen. But one small mistake, one small calculation, one ill-advised adventure on the part of anyone who matters could send the entire global community into a terrible, calamitous tailspin. So, there we are. I'm afraid Trump as the disruptor is not a matter of his personal choice. It might so seem that Trump is acting out of his personal volition. That may be true, but I feel that Trump is also a pawn in the hands of the forces of history. History is a chessboard on which very many moves are made. And Trump, for all his might, and for all the sense of self-assured brashness with which he behaves, is only a pawn on the chessboard of history. Watch out, and you will see that I am not wide of the mark. All the very best. Thank you for your kind attention.